Hi, everyone. Hello and happy holidays and happy Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Robert. I'll be not really your host, more your MC today. Our good friend Liz is going to be the host. So with that, I'll turn things over to Liz in just a moment. If you have to drop off this program early, or if you want to watch it again, or if you would know someone else that'd be interested, it'll be on our Washington, D.C. History and Culture YouTube page. It probably won't be able to get loaded, though, until tomorrow at the earliest, or maybe even Tuesday. But once it's loaded, I'll send out an email link, and you can check that out at your leisure. And so with that, Liz, take it away. It's all yours. And happy holidays to you, Liz.
Hi, happy holidays, Robert.
Our third annual Colonial Virginia Christmas Traditions program. Third annual.
Yes, 3 years. So we're going to keep rolling forward. I am so pleased to see everyone who could join us this afternoon. It's going to be a wonderful time for the next little while. So, judging by the number of Christmas lights that are in my neighborhood, we are deep into the Christmas season. And today we're going to talk about Christmas. First, we're going to explore Christmas as it was celebrated in Colonial Virginia, since I'm in Virginia. Then we're going to talk about how Colonial Williamsburg actually invented this very distinctive seasonal decorating style. And finally, I'm going to show you or demonstrate for you how to design and construct this Williamsburg-style wreath. So stick with me. I have lots of stories. Robert's going to be monitoring the chat, and at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. Right. So let's get started. This is a photo of the interior of Pohick Church, which is down the street from me in Lorton, Virginia. And we're starting in church because Christmas is one of the two most important feast days in the Anglican Church. And the Anglican Church was the established church in Virginia in the colonial period. The other important feast day is Easter. The liturgical calendar is divided into 4 seasons, and we're now in Advent, which commences 4 Sundays before Christmas and is the beginning of the liturgical year. And so within the church, that period of Advent was a time of reflection and contemplation, with fasting encouraged. So the first day of Christmas, December 25th, marked the birth of Jesus. Christmas continued for 12 days until January 6th, which is Epiphany. Epiphany is the day that the Magi arrived in Bethlehem, recognizing the baby as Christ the Savior. But then Christmas actually continues until February 2nd, which is called Candlemas, and that is the day of the purification of the Virgin. So this makes Christmas a 40-day cycle. So for those of you who think it starts on Thanksgiving and ends on Christmas Day, that's not the way it was in the 18th century. Or for those who think it ends after 12 days, also not. It is a 40-day cycle. So please feel free to leave your Christmas trees up until the beginning of February. Right?
I think stores thinks it begins the day after Halloween, I think. So I start seeing the Christmas stuff.
Or the stores in my area, it started like October 1st, I think. Right? I have a picture here of Christmas guns, right? Because in Virginia, Christmas was celebrated in a very secular kind of way. There's a fellow by the name of Philip Vickers-Fithian who is from New Jersey. He moved to Virginia in the 18th century to become a tutor to the Carter family that lived in Nominee Hall. And he recorded his first Virginia Christmas experience on December 18th in 1773. And he said, "Nothing is now to be heard of in conversation but the balls, the fox hunts, the fine entertainments, the good fellowship, which are to be exhibited at the approaching Christmas. I almost think myself happy that my horse's lameness will be sufficient excuse for my keeping at home on those holidays." And on Christmas morning itself, Fithian noted in his journal that he was waked this morning by guns fired all around the house. And that was a tradition. So you can only imagine being woken up to that because it's celebratory. And we're going to talk about how it differs from where Fithian was raised in New Jersey to how it was celebrated in Virginia. But before we're going to do that, we're going to talk about why we see green things, associated with the holidays. These are 2 different English prints that were each part of a different monthly series. Both of them are called December. And they show women who are collecting and then decorating with greens. So this idea of Christmas customs spreads to England by the 6th century, later reaches Scandinavia, where it's fused with this pagan Norse midwinter feast known as Yule. By the 9th century, during the reign of King Alfred, the Christmas celebration was extended by 12 days, which is how it ends on Epiphany. And then early in the 11th century, the term Christmas Mass, or Festival of Christ, enters the English language. Then early in the next century, Christmas really comes into use. So by the time we get to 17th, 18th century, the Anglicans, Roman Catholics, Lutherans, Moravians, they're all celebrating traditional Christmas season with both religious and also these secular observances. The celebrations in 18th century Virginia were observed in the communities associated with the old country for these different folks in New York and Philadelphia, the Middle Atlantic colonies, Pennsylvania and Maryland, and then throughout the South. And there's this tradition in the dead of winter of bringing in fragrantly smelling herbs, especially, and other plants like lavender and dried rose petals. Things that are really pungent, like rosemary and bay, are scattered throughout churches, and they provide this very pleasant kind of holiday scent. And these scented flowers and herbs were chosen partially because they're aromatic, and they're sort of considered an alternative form of incense. So the Reverend George Herbert, who's an Anglican clergyman from Maryland, he urged that the church be swept and cleaned throughout without dust or cobwebs, and at great festivals strewed and stuck with boughs perfumed with incense. And Virginians decorated their homes in the same way, most likely in the 1 or 2 main rooms where they're going to be observing this public Christmas. So how do you know what to bring into your house or the church on Christmas? This is a print that was produced in 1730. And if you could see down at the bottom, you'd see that each one of these different plants are individually labeled. So in 1730, a nurseryman in London by the name of Robert Ferber published a set of 12 prints, one for each month of the year, that depicted the different flowers that were in bloom for that particular month. It's a really cleverly devised marketing scheme to promote his nursery in Kensington. So they're the first illustrated seed catalog to be published in England. So when you look at this, you can see what was available to people to bring inside. Now we're going to hop to Virginia, right? So you've got your pretty plants, your pretty flowers, the things that smell really nice. Birthday celebrations were viewed as heathen. So the earliest Christians paid very little attention to Christ's birth, and it's not known exactly when they started to celebrate that Christmas. The first extant reference is 336, the year 336, when the Roman Catholic Church begins, or the Roman Church begins to celebrate the Feast of the Nativity on December 25th. And that is actually a fusing of these kind of pagan traditions associated with the winter solstice, things like wassail bowls, the use of holly, other evergreens for decoration came to be also brought into that celebration. But decorating one's home with ivy and other greenery was another tradition where the roots were dug really deeply into pagan Europe. And there's this yet another feature of the Roman Saturnalia that stretches from December 17th to the 24th. Right? And that's an agricultural tradition. So in the 13th century, a historian by the name of Matthew Paris said that Saturnalia was characterized by processions, singing, lighting candles, adorning the house with laurels and green trees, giving presents. Men dress as women, or they masquerade in the hides of animals. So all of these things become fused into the idea of Christmas. Right. And if you look at this particular scene, one of the reasons that I choose it is because behind the people who are reveling around a punch bowl, you can see a window. And in that window, there are little pieces of holly that are stuck into the windows themselves. So these are kind of window panes are a little bit, or the window glass fits a little bit loosely into the panes, and you can actually stick a little piece of holly, right, in between the window and the pain, and so bring some of that greenery inside. Okay. So not only was it common, and you can also see mistletoe in this picture too, right? So not only is it common to have your house decorated, it's also the sticking of the church. And this is another tavern scene that has those green boughs that have been brought into the windows. Right? But within the church, people are bringing in garlands of holly and ivy, mountain laurel, mistletoe is hung from the church roof, the walls, the church pillars, the galleries, even the pews and the pulpit, and sometimes the altar were bedecked with these garlands. And a scene like that was described by Peter Kalm, who was a Swede who visited Philadelphia in 1749. And on Christmas Day, he wrote, "Nowhere was Christmas Day celebrated with more solemnity than in the Roman Church. 3 sermons were preached there, and that which contributed most to the splendor of the ceremony was the beautiful music heard today. The pews and the altar were decorated with branches of mountain laurel, whose leaves are green in wintertime and resemble the cherry laurel." Right? So there's a saying, holly and ivy, box and bay, brought into the church on Christmas Day. But into your house, you might want to bring in mistletoe, right? And this is a picture of mistletoe, which is way up in the top of the trees. It is grows way up there. The only way you can get it down in the times before they had cherry pickers was by shooting it down. So that's one of the other reasons you might hear shooting on Christmas Day. Yeah. So gathering all of these things in these sort of different raucous ways. Now we're going to go to another raucous tavern scene, right? Most of the Christmas observances by the 18th century are secular. They're sort of offering this winter respite to this mainly agricultural workforce, whose minds and legs were usually dangling a bit in the quiet and dark months of winter. And though it bothers church officials, these vestiges of the pagan merriment are going to remain part of Christmas celebrations. Some of them prayed that the sacred would overtake the profane as pagans gave up their revels, but the merrymaking and feasting remains the most popular way of celebrating Christmas, at least in England. Now, in 1712, someone you've probably heard of, Cotton Mather, was writing from Boston, that the feast of the Christ Nativity is spent in reveling, dicing, carding, masking, and all in licentious liberty, by mad mirth and by long eating, by hard drinking, by lewd gaming, by rude reveling. Ah, Christmas, right? There's a little bit of enmity towards Christmas up there in those New England states, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is a broadside, or a couple of different broadsides. And I pulled out some details that show you how people are celebrating, because in Southern homes, it was actually 12th night, or January 6th, which is the more festive occasion. So one Englishman traveling through Virginia said, "It seems that this is one of their annual balls supported in the following manner. A large, rich cake is provided and cut into small pieces and handed round to the company, who at the same time draws a ticket out of a hat with something merry wrote on it. He that draws the king has the honor of treating the company with a ball the next year, and the lady that draws the queen has the trouble of making the cake." So a king and queen's cake is popular at that 12th night celebration. Now, going back to Williamsburg, Reverend James Blair, founder of the College of William and Mary, was awakened about midnight 2 weeks before Christmas in 1702 by the sound of great nails, as he called them, being pounded to fasten and barricade the doors of the grammar school. So plainly, Christmas cheer was about to overflow again once in Williamsburg, the capital of the colony, because the kids who were at the college were repeating this kind of English schoolboy custom of barring out their teachers. It's this ceremonial lockout that signals the start of the month of this Christmas jollity. So they want to start their holiday early if they can. The hammering really surprised Blair, he said, because the custom had been outlawed in years earlier. silly, silly man, right? Thinking you can outlaw tradition. Because Twelfth Night's the focus of the Christmas season, you have the balls, you have people gathering around, and the college, the Brafferton, the grammar school, all shut on December 16th, only will reopen after the 12th day. Even plantation classrooms were, not unbarred until after 12th night either. So Philip Fithian, the Carter tutor, had a little bit of a vacation himself in order to enjoy those Christmas holidays, right? How did they enjoy it? Well, the Virginia observation of Christmas is really tended towards fellowship and eating, right? Virginia Almanac, 1772, carried sentiments on the December page that this month much meat will be roasted in men's kitchens, the cooks sweating and making of minced pies and other Christmas cheer, and whole rivers of punch, toddy, wine, beer, and cider consumed with drinking. Cards and dice will be greatly used to drive away the tediousness of long, cold nights, and much money will be lost at whist, cribbage, and all fours. In England, it was the custom for an apprentice to visit each of his master's clients to collect tips for his services throughout the year, and that custom is followed in Virginia as well. So making the rounds and collecting your end of the year tips. But because December is a slow time agriculturally, it's also a really good time to take extended visits with family. And it's a very popular time of year for people to get married. This is a 19th century print that is depicting the wedding of Martha Dandridge Custis to George Washington, and they were indeed married on Twelfth Night. Now, like I said earlier, Virginia, the South, is a little bit different than those New England states, which is why Philip Fithian was so unprepared for the shooting of the guns on Christmas morning, because the celebration of Christmas was actually outlawed in most of New England. Those Calvinist Puritans and Protestants really abhorred the entire celebration, and they likened it to these pagan rituals and popish observances. In 1659, the General Court in Massachusetts forbade, under the fine of 5 shillings per offense, the observance of any such days as Christmas or the like, either by forbearing of labor, feasting, or any such way. So you can't take the day off and you can't have a party. The Connecticut Assembly in the same period prohibited the reading of the Book of Common Prayer, the keeping of Christmas and saints' days. The making of minced pies is forbidden, as is the playing of cards or performing on any musical instruments. And those statutes would remain in force until they were repealed early in the 19th century. Right, so why are the New Englanders so against Christmas? Well, it goes back to the dissolution of the British monarchy. And in 1647, Parliament actually abolishes the celebration of Christmas. Because remember, they've broken from the Roman Catholic Church and they have created the Church of England. And the idea behind that was to strip away all of the rituals and what they considered to be the corruption of Christianity. So that's why you have no Christmas policy, and Parliament reiterates this in 1652. No observation shall be had of the 5 and 20th day of December, commonly called Christmas Day. You can't decorate the church and you can't do anything else. This policy was not really enforced in Virginia. Because remember, the folks who came to Virginia and other parts of the South were not Puritans, right? So after the monarchy comes back, the Restoration, and the Puritans then leave and eventually wind up in New England. They're trying to keep the purity of that church, that Protestant church. But the Virginians, who were royalists or monarchists, are going to resurrect it in their colonies. So that's why you see that kind of bifurcation of how Christmas is observed in different parts of the colonies in North America. By the time we get to the 19th century, So, and Christmas was always a much bigger deal in the American South than it was in England. So it didn't come quite back up to speed, if you will, in England until really the 19th century when it started to take off again, right? So there's a man who lives in Williamsburg by the name of Charles Minigerode, who was a professor at the College of William and Mary, and he was German. And he was following a German tradition of decorating Williamsburg's first Christmas tree, bringing that tradition to the United States. Nathaniel Beverly Tucker invited Professor Minigerode to celebrate the holiday season at the Tucker House in Williamsburg. And it was reported he trimmed a tree with candles and fancy paper as a decoration for the Tucker's children. Right? And what you see here is a very popular 19th century print of Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, gathered around a Christmas tree in the 19th century. So remember, Albert was German, and so that tradition came to England. Okay? And then we start to see it becoming popular, as with many things that kings and queens promote throughout their kingdom, but also in places that had this attachment to English history. Okay. So while the Christmas tree comes to Williamsburg in the 19th century, the idea of decorating houses in the historic area comes in 1937. And that's when the first historic area residence doorway decorations contest takes place. So the decorations are judged on different criteria, like the types of materials, the creativity, the design, the faithfulness of spirit to 18th century decorative ideas, attention to detail, and so on and so forth. And it is a requirement for people who live in the historic area to decorate their houses following the rules for the Christmas season. And I lived in the historic area at Colonial Williamsburg for a few years, a few decades ago. And that's where I learned how to make wreaths, because they made me. It was actually written into the lease. And that tradition is something that has been carried forward, from 1937 to the present. When they first decorated in the 1930s, the greenery was kind of confined to a few kind of plain wreaths, some running cedar hung around the governor's palace and the Raleigh Tavern. We like to have fireworks in the historic area around Christmas time, because that's that kind of large-scale recreation of shooting of the guns or a grand illumination. It was one of the folks who worked at Williamsburg, who worked in the office, in the restoration office, who was placed in charge of flowers and Christmas decorations in the 1930s, Mrs. Louise Fisher. She was told to come up with something, so she drove up to the Library of Congress, where she turned up English and American pictorial examples of people decorating for the holidays. In 1939, her Della Robbia wreaths, which some of you have probably heard of, were attracting a lot of comment at the time, and that launches the Williamsburg Christmas look. No one really expected people to visit this newly restored Colonial Williamsburg during the holidays, but they did what they could, and then over time it has become larger and larger and larger. And I have this great picture of the governor's palace with some nice greenery, and they're trying to pull in that those boxwoods that you can see there into the wreaths and into the interior decorations. You can also start to see how, in addition to drawing on these traditions that you find in the primary sources, that there's certain design elements that are being incorporated into it as well. And I have here a picture of a table arrangement from Hannah Glass's cookbook. And I want you to pay careful attention to the way you have the symmetry of where the different dishes are to be laid out on the table. And we're going to talk a lot. So you have these 5 dishes over 5 dishes, and there's a relationship, if you could see like what they're labeled, that you always have something that's similar at each end of the table. So this is where we're going to start talking about this 18th century design concept of symmetry. Okay, so this is a picture of my house, and that's a picture of me with my roommate the first year that we decorated our house for Christmas. And we have 5 wreaths on the front door. And we did that because we were echoing that table arrangement that you saw in the prior slide. Right? So things that are similar in color and also are rotating around the central axis. The custom of affixing these fruits, vegetables, dried flowers, herbs, other plant life to these basic forms like wreaths go back to the early years of the 20th century, and then they roll forward, and the idea of that kind of an exterior decoration really starts to become popular through most of the 20th century, and then we see it being pulled into the 21st century. Okay. So let's talk about a few of the things that you're going to see in wreaths. Now, the rules for the historic area are the rules for the historic area. And you, of course, can do whatever you want in your wreath. But it's very common or popular to see things like these berries and berry wreaths, are pretty wonderful. And you can see them as little accents within what you're doing. Holly is a very popular decorating material because of the green and the red. And if it's outside, it actually lasts pretty well throughout the holiday season. Here is a wreath that is using holly as an accent within the construction of the wreath. Look at the use of dried materials. This one has the holly, which actually will stand up pretty well, but also pine cones. I've picked these pictures out for you because they're illustrating some of those 18th century plain and simple Virginia design concepts. So if you think about there being a central axis on whatever you're working on, is try, keep this an axis, or it could even be a parallel and perpendicular, that you want to have something that is mirrored or mirrorable along either the perpendicular or the parallel line. And I think the one in the center, even though it has 5 elements, is still kind of, you can still imagine it being cut down the center. Is what they're doing is they're creating an arrangement and then repeating it on the wreath a number of times. And the one on the far side with the shells is doing the same thing. So this idea of repetition of a particular kind of element makes for a very successful Williamsburg-style decoration. Right. And that, wishing you peace and joy for the new year, brings me to the end of the PowerPoint piece.
Bravo, Liz, that was awesome. Really amazing, all the different intricate details in the history of this endeavor.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. Right. So that one's going to go away. And I'm going to, I think it's going to go away. And maybe Robert can make it stop the share. Okay. Now stop that. And you should be seeing me, I think.
Yep.
Because now we're going to talk about how you actually construct some of these different items. Before we do that, Robert, is there anyone who had a question in the chat that I should answer before we get into demo?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I think people are anxious to see the wreaths.
Okay, all right, we want to see how that works.
But it is really amazing, just all the history and the details and how, these things just don't, these traditions and things don't just miraculously appear by themselves. They develop over time. People have inputs and stuff like that. So really cool.
All right. So we're going to look at, we're going to 3 different types of wreaths. So thanks for sticking with me. So for those of you who want to make these at home, they're really not that hard. You saw my roommate and I, who did it way back when, and I think we were both pretty successful at it. We never won the contest, but we were the fan favorite that first year. All right. So the first, hey, it's good to be the fan favorite. The first wreath I'm going to show you how to make is this one. Okay. This is a holly wreath. Okay. Doesn't that look cool? Right? I have a red door. It looks really great on the front. Okay. The technique for making this is the same as the technique for making one on a wire form. Okay. So at this point, give me 1 second because I am going to switch to a different camera. I think. Yes, here we go. It's a foam circle. I kind of like the smaller ones because there's just kind of not as much to do. Okay. So we're going to make the holly wreath on the foam circle. Or I'm going to show you how to make the holly wreath on the foam circle. So what we do is we go out and we cut a bunch of holly. And I am extremely fortunate that I have a holly tree in my front yard, and I have a boyfriend who is tall enough to be able to reach it without getting on a ladder, right? And he was kind enough to go out and cut all of this today. Right? So what we're going to do is create little bundles of holly. So here I have one without berries and one with berries because I want them to be kind of full, right? And then I have, some of you probably recognize this as it's like a gardening wire. It's kind of like a length of twist tie, has a little bit of metal in there, and you usually use it to like tie your tomato plants to the stakes. So I've cut it into small sections, right, with my little wire snippers here, which I got in the jewelry supply section at Michael's. So this is really easy. You just take your little bundles and wire them together. Right? My second needle nose pliers to make sure it's nice and tight. Doesn't need to be super tight. It just needs to be kind of sort of tight, because I'm going to be fixing it to that foam, that form. Right? So when I have enough of these bundles, I'm going to put those to the side, and I have enough to show you how to do that now. I need my pins. So I have these things that are called greening pins. Get them at the craft store. You can order them online. Or if you really can't find them, you could probably do it with hairpins. Not bobby pins, but actual hairpins, because you can see they're just little pins, right? So you take your bundles and you start to work. Sure, if I can see it and you can see it, by laying whatever it is you're putting onto the wreath. This is the same. You could also do this with boxwood. You could do this with something else if you wanted this more three-dimensional shape. I'm just going to pin it to the wreath. I'm going to take my next bundle and you can see it, overlay it, my next pin, and pin it straight into the foam. Then I'm going to continue working all the way around the wreath until I get to the end. And because of the way you're overlaying them, you need a couple more pins. More pins. When you get to the end, because they're overlapped, you'll have covered all of the areas of the pinning. And it's pretty sturdy. So you just keep working your way around and around and around until you're finished. So let me switch back so I can hold it up and show it to you again. There we go. All right. See, Right.
Oh,
Two
very
people have
cool.
raised
Wow.
their hands. Let's answer that question. Okay.
Let's see. So if you raised your hand, it might be easier if you just type your comment or question into the chat or the Q&A.
Oh, when did the crescents start? The crescents were also back in the late 1930s and into the 40s. Yeah.
And what about, so the circles, people I'm imagining could reuse those if they wanted to. They could just take the holly off and hold on to it.
Yes. Not only do I reuse the circles, I am going to reuse the pins, right? So at the end of the season, I just take off all of the holly and I toss that, but I keep the pins.
Okay, well, that's good to
I don't
know.
want to have to keep buying pins every year, right?
Oh, you got a request to show the back of the holly wreath. The behind the scenes look. Oh, okay.
Yep. So I do it all. So it's just overlaying. You're just overlapping and overlapping. And I do it on the front. And then I also do some on the top as well. And I might need to stick it in a little bit better because this is going on my front door or my window. So nobody's going to really see the back. And because of where I live in a neighborhood and people are not, other than, you know, like the Amazon guy, is not coming up to the front door and taking a really good look at the wreath and looking for bald spots. Now,
You don't
I
have
lived
those.
in this, yeah.
You don't have those pesky Colonial Williamsburg wreath inspectors.
Yeah, well, when I lived in the historic area, people would come stick their noses right into the wreaths.
Oh,
So
really?
you wanted to make sure that they were, that everything was really, really well fixed because you didn't want them, because people would touch it too.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So it can be pretty, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. And this will last through the, you know, for all intents and purposes through the Christmas season.
Okay.
Because again, people aren't looking at it that closely, right? See a couple more questions. Okay, so we saw the back as well, right? So that's one kind of wreath. I love that wreath. I really love the holly wreath because I like how exuberant it is. And because I have the holly tree, it's free. Right? I also want to show you, however, how to make an evergreen wreath. So if you look behind me on this wall, we have a decorated evergreen wreath, but I'm going to show you how to actually make the wreath itself using a wreath form. So how we can get good contrast. You've probably seen these wire circles at the craft store. I bought this little teeny tiny one at the Dollar Tree because I like making the little small ones. And since I haven't gotten my tree yet this season, I don't have any leftover pine boughs. And that's really the best way to get pine boughs is to either, like when you get your tree and they cut off the bottoms for the tree stand, is to save all of those, you know, or to go to a place where they are selling trees and ask if you can just gather them up. And most places will say, sure, they don't mind that you take those scraps, right? So same concept. So I'm going to make an urban cedar wreath instead of a fir wreath or Fraser wreath because that's what I have in my yard. So what I have here is a little bit of cedar that I cut from my bush. And then I have a sprig of rosemary. So I have a lot of rosemary. And I also have some lavender in my front yard. So it's the same idea as that you're creating little bundles. So I have my kind of twist tie. You can actually use twist ties because no one's going to see them if you don't want to buy this and then cut it. I'm going to put it together and twist it because no one's going to see it. Make it pretty tight. All right. So now I have a bundle, right? And earlier today, I made lots and lots and lots of bundles. I'm going to switch to the other camera so you can see how I'm going to put it together, right? So we'll do this one. This is a really small wreath, so it can go pretty fast. Okay. I have got some wire. Lots of different types of wire in the world. Floral wire. Here's some floral wire. So you want it to be on a spool. This is not floral wire. This is, I type of electrical wire that I bought for a project that I was working on a long time ago, because I do some science projects for museums, and I had it left over and I don't want it to go to waste, and it's green and I like the fact that it's green. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the floral wire in my project. So up here at the top of the wreath, I know it's the top of the wreath because I've attached a little piece of wreath hanger on the back. I'm going to start the spool. I'm going to take a sprig that I've already put together down here. I'm going to lay it on top of that wire and wrap it a couple times. Okay. Next sprig, overlapping it and wrap it. Sprig, just working my way around. Robert, if I verge off camera, can you say something? Because I'm trying to make sure it's perfectly visible to people.
So far, so good.
Yeah, okay. So we're just going to wrap it pretty tight. I want it to be extra safe. I could probably take a piece of twist tie and twist tie it in there as well. But again, I'm not really worried that people are going to come up and poke their noses or fingers into my wreaths. I think I made enough bundles. We'll see. Tie. It's almost a shame that this is going to go on the outside of the house because it smells really, really good with the rosemary and the lavender.
Yeah, Cynthia just mentioned that. The lavender must smell wonderful.
It does. Yeah.
Now, if you're doing these for inside or outside, do you have to do anything differently?
It's all the same. Just keeping in mind that they are going to dry out. Oh, look, I probably could have made one more bundle. Okay. Oh, well. It'll be fine. If I hang it on my house, I'm going to do one more bundle. But for your purposes, I'm just going to tie it off. So I'm having that thin wire. I cut it. Now I'm going to fix it here. And
then there was a question, how do you decide when to use floral wire versus garden wire?
I am using this wire because I already own this wire. If I didn't own this
That's a good one.
Yeah, then I would be using my floral wire. I will say what I like about the electrical wire is that it's really thin and it's green.
Okay.
I have even thinner electrical wire in red. Okay. And I'm going to use this for something else I'll show you. To tell you how long ago it was, I bought it at Radio Shack. So I got to use it up. So here, I'm going to switch cameras so you can see it. I'm going to hold it up for you. Here we go. So you see? That's the technique that you would use if you're going to do it like from the bits of your Christmas tree, right?
Okay, bravo.
Okay. And I can just put this, and I like this one because it has like the little blueberries in it. Now, if I wanted to take this a step further, right now I can decorate it in some other way. And I'm going to look around, say my house or my yard or my craft store for different kinds of decorating options. This is a cotton pod. Actually, the technical term is a cotton bowl, but the package said pod because probably people don't know what bowl means. But I could take those cotton bowls, right? And I can affix them by wiring them onto my wreath. Okay? If you don't like that.
Where did you get the cotton at?
The Dollar Tree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There were 2 in a package. Everyone recognizes these little clementines, right?
Oh, yeah.
Put clementines. I think this would look really great on the little wreath because the scale is correct. And the orange looks really, really good against the green. Right? So I can do what I would probably do on this is maybe 4 of them, working my way around, or maybe 5. Okay. If I wanted to, I could probably mix in a little bit of other types of greenery, right? So I have a little bit of holly. I have some dried grass in my yard. So I cut a piece of this. Wheat sheaves are pretty popular. You can get those at the craft store, like Michael's. And if you take really good care of them, since they're dried, you could probably save those from one year to the next. But I kind of like this. And since they're already on their own little stick, I can sort of also work my way around. I think it'd be prettier if it was a wheat sheaf.
Cynthia asked if you can hot glue the bowls and the oranges.
You can hot glue the bowls, but if you do that, you can't use them again, right? You can't really do the oranges because they'll fall off. See, do y'all like that?
And duct tape is frowned upon. So I'm sure there's guys watching saying they would just
Yeah.
duct tape it on there.
Right. Do you like that? Like the orange?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that color. Okay. So.
And you have one of your fans from that saw the previous years and remembered the pomegranates.
Yes, yep. Oh, and anything dry, if you were to cut your pomegranate and kind of open it up, that would look nice too. Do any of you have magnolia trees in your yard? Because those magnolia leaves, the really shiny side, are real pretty. You can make bundles. And then also the brown side, so you can do kind of back and forth and alternate your colors. I want to show you how to affix things to the wreath, so specifically the oranges. So let's go back here.
What about, I know you're just doing these for yourself, but like going back to the Colonial Williamsburg, do they have like specific rules you have to follow? Like, you know, you can't put a Hershey bar on the wreath, or you can't put fake plant or something on it.
Yeah, there's definitely rules, and the rules have gotten kind of relaxed over time a little bit. It's supposed to be only things that would have been available to the people in 18th century Virginia.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be all natural products. Like I had a friend who lived in a building that had been a laundry, and they put soap, right? Little balls of soap into the roof, right? You could do bundles of cinnamon sticks. Some of you are probably familiar with putting cloves into oranges. So you can decoratively stick the cloves in the oranges and then wire them on. Okay. So this is a fake wreath. That way I can use it year after year after year, right? I have my oranges. I'm sorry, these are lemons, because I like the way the lemons kind of pop, and you can see it from the street. First, I'm going to show you how to do the lemon. Reach back up here. Hope it doesn't bring down like the entire thing. Okay. So this is floral wire. This is 22 gauge floral wire. It can actually be a little bit heavier floral wire. Let's switch to the other camera. This is super easy. So here's my lemon, right? I'm going to stick the wire all the way through the lemon to the other side. Fold it over, right? And now it's ready to just put onto the wreath. See? Put it on the wreath, twist it behind, and now you have that piece of fruit is not going anyplace. So you can kind of see, let me switch the camera again. Here. I didn't realize you could see me switching the camera. Okay. So here's the back. I think you can almost see some of the wire that's sticking out of the back, but you don't see it. So that's how you fix the lemons. I'm a big fan of the cranberries. Right? So the cranberries are strong just like popcorn. Right? So to do the cranberries, I got myself a nice big needle. This is actually the one that I do a lot of knitting, and this is the needle with the big eye that I use when I'm tying off the ends. And then I go to my electrical wire, which is a really, really thin wire, thread it like a needle, and then just thread those cranberries and worked their way all the way, until I had enough of the length, and then just twisted around the wreath. So super easy. One year I did golden raisins, right? Because they're like a pretty color, and they show up nicely against the green. So anything that you can string. And since it's, your house and you don't have to abide by any rules, you could string beads if you wanted to. Just something that is going to dry appropriately. Okay. So this wreath is perfectly nice the way it is, but we were experimenting earlier today and decided that we could take this a step further. Right? So my tall boyfriend, he went out, because he's a very kind person, and collected a whole bunch of pine cones for me. Right? Lots of pine cones. Also free, big advantage. Right? And he brought back the pine cones. So here's a pine cone. And then here is something called a wooden pick. So it comes in a package labeled wooden picks. There's a five and dime store where I live, and so I got these there. At this point, you probably have to buy them from Amazon, because I don't think Michael's has them. But maybe you live someplace with a good craft store. So it's a piece of wood with a wire coming off the end. We put it against the pine cone and just wrap the wire around the pine cone until it's pretty sturdy. So now we have the pine cone on a pick. Okay. So we thought would look kind of nifty. Let me find the top of it. Is to start to work those pine cones in just by sticking them into the form around around the lemons. Remember how I talked about how you have an element and you create symmetry around the elements. Okay, so think of it as being a lemon right, with two pine cones. Okay. I'm going to put this down for a second so I can stick in. There we go. I'll change the camera so you can see me sticking those pine cones in, because it's kind of hard to hold to do that. Here. Those. Pine cone. Because this is a fake wreath. Move the wires, the wired branches around a little bit. This is what they are, to better hold things in position. I like them all to kind of go in that same direction. And then here's the last one. That one looked initially, so let's fix that a little bit. And now, switch to the camera, so I'm going to hold it up. Ready for the reveal? Here it is.
Oh, well, that's cool.
So what do y'all think? It made a difference, didn't it? like adding another color and a little bit of dimensionality. Like it took something that I thought was pretty nice before, and it just really made, I think, all the difference. Yeah.
Where can we place our order?
Yeah.
I'll take one of each.
Yep. And then at the end of the season, I will save the pine cones. So I have them available to me next year. I don't have to go collect more of them, and I don't have to go and put them onto pins. So I'm trying to find where my wire hanger went so I can put it back up on the wall.
So we had someone just joined us late.
Yeah.
They asked, how were the lemons put on?
So the lemons, I have a piece of floral wire, and they come in a package of floral wire, right? So you get, there were 35 pieces of this. I actually cut mine in half because I'm kind of cheap, and that was enough. So I stick the wire all the way through the lemon, okay, and then just twist it onto the wreath. And that will stick pretty well. That will hold. Right, here it is. Right, so let's put this back up over here. All right. Before I put it on the front of the house, I'm going to go back and make sure all of my pine cones are in there pretty securely. I'll admit I'm kind of moving a little bit fast for you all because I don't want to take up your entire afternoon. Okay, so what we've covered is the history of Christmas decorations, or the history of Christmas in leading up to colonial Virginia, how Colonial Williamsburg as an entity, as a historical museum and a place where people want to come celebrate, developed this very distinctive style of decorating with natural materials, even if the wreaths are fake, and a demonstration of how you at home can use those techniques and your own inspiration to create different kinds of wreaths, and then to decorate them with materials that are meaningful to you. So, do you all have any questions?
Oh yeah, there were a few questions. Someone asked about using sliced oranges. How do people do that?
Sliced oranges, you have to dry them. So you have to use like a food dehydrator, I would think. I've never tried to do sliced oranges. I have done apples, or I've sliced sections of the apples and then dried them. I have also used dried orange peel.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you just punch a little hole in it.
Okay. And then there was a question from Jan. On a lot of modern wreaths, I have seen bows. Did they use bows in Williamsburg times?
No. Well, no. Well, I think they do now because things have kind of changed. But when I lived in the historic area, you were not supposed to put a bow on your wreath, even though technically, ribbon was available in the 18th century.
Okay. Now, so how did green and red become like the colors of Christmas? Is that something to do with the wreaths, or they only use green and red here in America, or the only thing like, why is it green and red, not blue and
why is
yellow?
It green and red? Well, the green comes from bringing the green into houses and churches. So what are the things that are, green and living and kind of vibrant coming in? Because I'm looking out my window now behind me, and there's a lot of brown out there. So bringing in the green is wonderful. And then the red, it's, like the holly berries, right? It's the thing that's available.
And a nice complementary color.
Yeah. Right. And of course, in 18th century Virginia, nobody is going to stick a lemon because they're really expensive, or a pineapple or anything like that on a wreath to let it dry out over the course of the season. And remember, they decorated the insides of the houses, not the outsides.
Okay. What about question from Sander? Do you ever use a grapevine wreath?
I have not, but I've seen them, and they're really beautiful. And I think one of the things is that you want to be able to see maybe the grapevine too, so you can do something really beautiful and simple.
Okay. And then let's see, this is a question from earlier, right at the end of the presentation. Don't know if I missed what year the lighting of the crescent started. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Crescents.
that was pretty early, because the concept of grand illumination has less to do with Christmas per se than it had to do with birth night balls. So that's where Colonial Williamsburg kind of merged an 18th century thing that happened to, well, they did a lot of merging, right? And made it a Christmas tradition. And then the crescents, bring people throughout the historic area, later in the evening.
Okay. And you might have mentioned this, I stepped away for a moment, but so some of the Christmas stuff was not allowed in like the Puritan type of section, but then eventually it was. Was there a certain event that happened, or was it just kind of gradually over time they just loosened up things as more people that weren't Puritans moved in?
Yeah, so Christmas is, so when you each have all the different colonies have their own laws. So then you have, so after the Revolution, you have the Articles of Confederation, right, which is the national government, but colonies still have their own laws. So it's after the Constitution that you get federal laws, not that there's a federal law saying you can't have Christmas, but it's the 19th century, after we start to thinking of ourselves as more of a singular country, and also there's a lot more movement within the states, that the various New England states begin repealing what were the anti-Christmas statutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was no Christmas in most of the New England states from the arrival of the Pilgrims until the 19th century.
Right. Okay, no problem. So if anyone has any questions or comments for Liz, please type those in the chat or the Q&A for our third annual wreath making program. There was someone earlier who said she saw all three, so kudos to you. Well, certificates.
I guess I owe you a wreath if you're a 3-year repeat.
Yeah. No, it is really amazing because just for me, who doesn't do arts and crafts stuff, it looks like it'd be a really complicated process. And I'm sure you make it look easier than it is, just because of your talent and experience and skills and stuff. But I can kind of see where, oh, okay, yeah, you would take these things and put it together, and so it does look doable.
Oh, it's very doable. It's very doable, and you can't do anything wrong because you're doing what you like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so whatever appeals to you.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed last year a lot of people were asking about the rules, like, oh, is it okay to use such and such? Kind of anything goes as long as you're not competing in the Colonial Williamsburg official competition.
Yeah, exactly. How long have I been doing it? So I learned how to do it. Let's just say decades. It's been decades. It's been decades. And then when I left the historic area, I left Colonial Williamsburg. Now I live in Northern Virginia. I worked at a lot of museums in the interim, and I just do it for my own edification. So
okay, well, that's cool. Do many of your neighbors get in the spirit after they see you leading the charge?
Yeah, there's a lot of very lovely wreaths along with the lights up and down my road. So it's kind of a lot of fun to see. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have a few 3-year participants, Audrey, and let's see. So that's nice. Let's see. Okay, so last call for any questions or comments that people might have.
Yeah, I should say, if anyone has made wreaths themselves, post pictures to the chat. We'd like to see your wreaths.
Yeah, we should have a competition. I just thought of that now. We mentioned that last year. Mm-hmm. We should have a competition. People could post their pictures. We can give away a prize. I don't know what we could give away because we don't really have much to offer. But
well, we can give away just a virtual ribbon, right? Just say you're the winner.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because we all have enough stuff. We don't need trophies in our lives, right? Just some acknowledgement.
We can give away a free ticket to Colonial Williamsburg.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
Let's see. All right, well, I think that does it for the questions. So if you joined us late, we've been recording this program. We'll post it on YouTube, but probably won't be able to do that till tomorrow though, or maybe even Tuesday. I'll email out the link. And Liz, once again, fabulous having you here and teaching us about this historical and cultural information.
Right.
It's just really amazing, just the history behind it and how it's evolved over such a long time.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. I hope you all do post some pictures. And if I don't see you before then, I'll see you this time in 2023.
Yeah, for the 4th annual.
For the 4th annual.
All right, well, thanks, Liz. Have a great holiday. Thanks so much for spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.